Imagine Caracas, early 60s, an ordinary family. No last names that open doors, no university traditions, no talk of careers. Higher education never happens for you at all. No diploma, no professor's recommendations. No illusion that a piece of paper decides fate. What you get instead is a different kind of knowledge. Urban, street level, practical. Early on, you grasp how the country works. The ability to speak matters less than the ability to be one of us. And uniform and connections move faster than any talent. By the late 80s, you're driving a bus in Caracas. No romance, survival on a timetable. Crowds, heat, routes, passengers with politics on their tongues and empty pockets. And this is where politics actually begins. Not in lecture halls, but in smoking areas and drivers' meetings. Public transport in the capital is a pressure point, so unions quickly turn into schools of leverage. You join the activist corps, take part in negotiations, organize protests, get used to conflict. No diploma, but you have a voice, patience, and the ability to hold the line. From there, things unfold pragmatically. After the coup attempt of 1992, you find yourself orbiting left radical circles drawn to military figures from Hugo Chávez's entourage. The reason is simple. You're not an ideologue and not a star, but a convenient link between the street and a future party. You know how to gather people, pass signals upward, and avoid asking unnecessary questions. In a world where everyone wants to speak, you stand out by listening and executing. That's how you, Nicolas Maduro, enter the Chavista movement, not through manifestos or theory, but through unions and organizational work. The lack of formal education turns into an advantage. No one suspects you of independence. You transmit the line, maintain discipline, strengthen the center. A large project needs exactly this kind of person. No ambitions of public leadership, but full controllability. And that becomes your starting capital. Then the country hits a turn. Late 90s, Venezuela's old party system collapses. Trust in elites drops below zero, and Hugo Chávez steps onto the stage. To voters, he's a military man, a rebel, the voice of the street. To you, he's an opportunity. You work on his campaign not as an ideologue or media face, but as an organizer, field level, the one who keeps contact with unions, activists, grassroots structures. You stay out of the spotlight, but you're always in place. In 1998, Chávez wins the election, and the system begins to rebuild itself around a single person. Your rise inside this system is fast and quiet. In 2000, you enter the National Assembly, formally a deputy. In reality, a disciplined component of the new vertical. You vote correctly, speak carefully, don't mix up the line. Then comes parliamentary leadership. In 2005, you become Speaker of the Assembly. Still no higher education, but you acquire the key trait of the Chávez era: absolute reliability. In a system where every second person dreams of becoming a second Chávez, you stand out by having no such dreams. That's what brings you closer. Chávez values controllability more than brilliance. He likes charisma in himself and execution in others. He describes you simply: loyal, reliable, a man of the revolution. No philosophy, no ornament. You can repeat his theses, hold a pause, transmit signals downward, and avoid creating alternative centers of influence. For a leader building a personalist system, that's almost an ideal profile. The next step is foreign policy. In 2006, you become Minister of Foreign Affairs. You have no formal background for the post, and none is required. Your task is to transmit Chávez's position, not formulate your own. You read speeches, repeat formulas, represent the country as an extension of a single voice. Later, you move into the role of vice president. By then, you're fully embedded in the core of power. No personal faction, no independent electorate, but full access to the system's nerve center. At this point, the country really does feel an upswing. Oil prices stay high, state revenues grow, and for the first time in years, money begins reaching the street. GDP rises, the budget fills, social programs stop being slogans and become everyday reality. The state returns to neighborhoods it used to visit only before elections. Free healthcare, access to education, subsidized food, housing for the poor. All of it works and delivers tangible results. Poverty declines, inequality narrows, the mood at the bottom shifts. The country feels that the system is functioning again. During this period, you do what you do best: turn political will into a manageable process. While Chávez sets the tone and holds the masses' attention, you make sure the apparatus doesn't collapse under the weight of money and promises. Parliament, ministries, external fronts, everything has to move in sync. Social programs rely not only on oil, but on discipline. You ensure decisions pass, execution is monitored, and political cover is in place. No loud initiatives, no personal brand, but results. In foreign policy, your role also becomes part of this rise. You represent the country at a time when Venezuela is once again perceived as a player. Contracts, alliances, regional projects, energy diplomacy, all of it slots into economic growth. Chávez speaks in the language of emotion and symbols. You speak the language of protocols and agreements. Together, it works. It's during this period that Chávez finally solidifies his view of you. He sees someone who doesn't interfere with the system's operation and doesn't try to replace the source of legitimacy. In an environment full of ambition and competition, that's a rare quality. He repeatedly emphasizes that you're someone who can hold course and carry decisions through to the end. So when he publicly speaks of a successor, The wording is bluntly pragmatic. Maduro is the one capable of preserving direction and ensuring continuity of the project. After Chávez's death, you enter the election as his designated heir. The campaign runs on the inertia of his name, without a personal reserve of trust. The result is a win by the narrowest of margins. About 1.5%. The gap is so thin, it immediately becomes a political problem. The opposition declares the result illegitimate, demands a recount, and the street erupts in protest within days of the announcement. This isn't abstract discontent. It's a direct challenge to your right to occupy the presidential palace. Your first move is to retain control over the procedure. The National Electoral Council confirms the results. A selective audit is conducted in a format that doesn't change the outcome. You don't allow a full recount. The logic is simple. A recount turns weakness into precedent. Power that starts justifying itself stops being power. This moment becomes the reference point for everything that follows. In parallel, you move against the street. Protests are suppressed quickly and forcefully. Police and the National Guard receive expanded authority. Preventive detentions of activists become standard practice. This is framed as restoring order after an attempt at destabilization. The signal is read unambiguously. The next step is the courts. The Supreme Court begins acting as a political filter. Parliamentary decisions are blocked, opposition complaints dismissed, any attempts to challenge the election results die at the legal level, formally, within the law. In practice, through control over how that law is interpreted, you don't abolish institutions, you retune them to yourself. A separate track is the security apparatus. You strengthen your reliance on the military and the security services, expand their influence over the economy and governance. The armed forces gain access to key sectors, including resource allocation and control over logistics. It's a trade, loyalty in exchange for influence. With minimal electoral support, this apparatus becomes the main guarantee of stability. In public rhetoric, all of this is framed as defending the revolution from a comeback. Internally, it's cold calculation. You understand that no one will grant you a second chance at legitimacy. A victory by 1.5% leaves no room for soft politics. Any concession is read as an invitation to the next attack. So the course is chosen immediately. Control, preemption, pressure. This is where temporary measures stop being temporary. Mechanisms activated for the crisis begin to operate permanently. You're not yet building a new system. You're simply preventing the old one from collapsing. But each subsequent step makes a return to the previous format less and less possible. Then hard times arrive. The crisis begins almost immediately. In 2014, global oil prices collapse by more than half. For you, this strikes at the very foundation of the system. Oil provides the country with almost all its foreign currency earnings, and there are no alternative sources. Money suddenly dries up, imports collapse, reserves melt away. An economy designed around a constant inflow of petrodollars stops breathing. You don't pivot to reforms. You tighten control. The currency regime is hardened. Dollars are allocated manually through state structures. The official rate detaches from reality, and the black market becomes the primary reference point. Imports depend not on demand, but on access. Shelves empty out. Shortages become normal. Inflation accelerates rapidly. First tens of percent, then hundreds, then thousands. By the end of the latter half of the 2010s, it's already measured in millions of percent per year. The national currency ceases to perform its function. Wages collapse in real terms. Teachers, doctors, civil servants earn the equivalent of about $15 a month. Sometimes 2 or 3. People survive on remittances from abroad, barter arrangements, and odd jobs. The state responds with food boxes and targeted payments that don't save the economy but do retain loyalty. You explain what's happening the same way every time. External pressure, sanctions, conspiracy, economic war. It works as political armor. Admitting mistakes would mean admitting weakness, and weakness in your position equals defeat. So you choose distribution over growth and control over efficiency. The economy contracts, but the vertical remains intact. Against this backdrop, protests become constant. People take to the streets not for slogans, but for food and money. The response stays harsh. Police, the National Guard, and the security services operate without pause. Arrests, criminal cases, pressure on organizers. Your logic is simple. A concession triggers a chain reaction, and a chain reaction collapses the entire structure. Gradually, the security forces stop being a tool. They become the pillar. You hand them control over resource distribution, logistics, and key sectors of the economy. In return, you receive loyalty. The dependency flips. Now you need them more than they need you. This process drags on for years and becomes irreversible. At the same time, the country begins to empty out. Millions leave. The active, the young, the educated, the dissatisfied. Internal pressure eases. You see the exodus and understand it undermines the future, but you accept it as an acceptable price. Fewer people, less protest, less energy, less risk. Then you declare a war on corruption, believing this is the root of the problem. In the logic of the moment, it looks right. If prices are rising, then resellers must be to blame. You bet on demonstrative actions, arrests of owners of consumer electronics stores, the nationalization of the DACA chain, confiscation of goods, and their sale at reduced prices. Cameras roll. The crowd is pleased. The effect is immediate. and short-lived. The shortage doesn't go away. Inflation by the end of the first year of your presidency reaches 56%. The economy doesn't respond to gestures. In 2014, tension spills into the streets. The economic crisis overlaps with rising crime, and protests turn into clashes with police. There are deaths. For you, it's a signal. Social discontent is starting to take on a political form. The following year brings no relief. Global oil prices keep falling. The global downturn intensifies pressure. Consumer goods grow even more expensive. Inflation accelerates to 181%. In 2016, the bolivar has to be devalued by nearly 40%. Money rapidly loses meaning. Hyperinflation and shortages break everyday life. People face food scarcity, explosive price growth, and a collapse of healthcare. This is no longer an abstract crisis. It's a humanitarian reality. From 2016 through the first half of 2018, between 1.5 and 4 million people leave the country, depending on estimates. The outflow then slows but doesn't stop. By 2023, more than 7 million have left Venezuela. You see it. You understand the country is emptying out. And at the same time, you understand something else. Internal pressure is easing. Politically, you're under constant attack as well. In 2016, the National Assembly accuses you of a coup d'etat for blocking a recall referendum and initiates impeachment proceedings. You buy time through negotiations. A representative of Pope Francis becomes involved. The impeachment is suspended. An opposition march is cancelled. You keep your post. But already at the start of 2017, Parliament tries to declare you unfit for office. The Supreme Court rules the decision unconstitutional. Legally, you're in the right. Politically, the conflict becomes chronic. You respond by tightening control. In 2017, you announce the need to change the Constitution. Elections to a constituent assembly are held despite an opposition boycott. New U.S. sanctions follow, along with increased international pressure. In August 2018, there's an assassination attempt. Explosive drones during a parade. You survive. Several people are injured. Arrests follow, accusations of an external plot, and a sharp tightening of the screws. By 2019, the crisis produces an alternative center of power. The Speaker of Parliament, Juan Guaido, declares himself interim president and attempts to take control of the country. The attempt fails. You state that you will remain in power until the end of the term. Next come early elections in 2024. Victory by a razor-thin margin. The opposition claims fraud and presents figures that, in their version, completely erase your legitimacy. The street boils again. In public rhetoric, it's all explained the same way. External interference, color revolutions, U.S. pressure. Inside, the logic is different and much simpler. The economy Davno became a hostage to politics. Any reform looks like a concession. Any concession looks like the beginning of the end. So you choose preservation over change, control over growth, a system that no longer develops, but still stands. To understand you, politics alone isn't enough. Venezuela's economy spent decades living like an oil machine, where rent replaced reform and distribution replaced efficiency. As long as the money kept flowing, the system held together. When the flow stopped, it turned out there were almost no backup mechanisms. Management errors and sanctions piled on top of each other. The oil sector choked. Investment fled, people left. And at that point, power and the state nearly fused into one. You didn't design this structure from scratch. You ended up inside it at a moment when there was no road back. From 2019 onward, the external frame around you tightens completely. The United States publicly recognizes Juan Guaido as interim president. For Washington, you stop being a legitimate head of state. This isn't rhetoric. It's a legal position. Once you're not recognized as president, you can be treated differently, without respect for status or immunities. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice moves from politics to criminal procedure. Charges are brought against you and a group of Venezuelan officials for trafficking, corruption. You deny everything. Inside the country, it's called pressure and blackmail. Outside, it's an open criminal file, not analysis. Then comes a signal that usually means serious intent. A bounty. By 2025, the United States increases the reward for information leading to your arrest to up to $50 million. Figures like that aren't posted for headlines. They're an invitation to hunt. In parallel, the line with the International Criminal Court drags on. The investigation concerns alleged crimes against humanity. One important detail: the ICC operates on personal responsibility. A change of power doesn't automatically close the case. It's a long game where time doesn't always heal. After the 2024 elections, pressure intensifies again. The results are contested. Human rights groups document mass detentions. The term Operation Tuntun enters common use. The knock on the door as a method of enforcing silence. Sanctions relief granted earlier is withdrawn. The logic is simple. No transparent steps, no relief. By this point, you're living in a reality where foreign policy is no longer about negotiations. It's about warrants, investigations, sanctions, and waiting for a mistake. And you understand that. Then comes what, until recently, looked like a political thriller scenario. On January 3rd, 2026, The United States moves from pressure to action. President Donald Trump publicly announces the capture of you and your wife in a large-scale operation. According to U.S. agencies, you're taken out of Venezuela with the intent to stand trial in the United States on the previously filed charges. Details are scarce. Part of the information comes exclusively from Washington. Inside the country, statements are issued about illegal intervention, violation of sovereignty, and demands to confirm your status. But the fact remains. The moment everything had been moving toward since 2019 materializes. Pressure, sanctions, criminal charges, and bounties converge at a single point. At this stage, politics finally stops being a metaphor. It becomes jurisdiction, a special operation, and physical control. And this is no longer a debate about legitimacy. It's the end of a long chain of decisions, where each previous step narrowed the space for exit.